There's one key piece a lot of therapists are missing. And when your therapy work feels frustrating, confusing, or stagnant, this just might be the reason why.
Helping your clients set clear goals is the magic ingredient for satisfying therapy work. I think it'll make it easier on you and more efficient for your clients. So, Skye, I have a question for you. What goes into a good goal? How would you define it? What are we exactly talking about here?
Well, to be honest, I'm going to go with something that I've learned from you because really before I took your course, my goals were kind of all over the place and I didn't have the good sense to know it. So nowadays, a good goal for me is something that is really self-informed. It's something that is controllable inside of your own internal operation, meaning wanting someone else to do something as your therapy goal really doesn't work. But this is where a lot of clients start when they come to me for help and support. They don't have any idea sometimes how disempowering the goals that they've stated actually are. And so getting them first to have that understanding that we're going to look at goals that might take even this whole session potentially is really important. So first I start by having them buy in a little bit to this concept that if you really want to feel empowered in your work, then let's come up with something that you can impact 100% within yourself. Does that make any sense?
It does, but it also, I understand what it is that you're talking about, but I'm imagining that some of our listeners might want some examples of what is a goal that's within yourself? Because I think for me at least, most of the clients that come to me for any kind of therapy or coaching, whether it's individual or relationship work, mostly people want to change their circumstances or they want their partner to change. And I think what you just said is that that's a disempowering stance. So I'm curious to discuss that more.
Yeah. So for me in my work, a goal that has to do with me might look something like I want to lose weight, as opposed to I want my partner to stop making unhealthy meals. So if they were to say something about what they want their partner to do so that they can lose weight, because oftentimes there's this connection, right? There's this connection between what somebody else is doing and what I want, or what someone else is doing and how I'm going to get this thing. So I like to kind of see if we can clip out that part that has to do with what someone else does and help them get to what ultimately do you want and how can you make choices or pivots that's going to bring that to pass.
So what do you want to do differently yourself that's going to get you closer to the experience you have?
That is so well stated. Yes, exactly right. And sometimes that's a little bit tricky because I think we're kind of trained to look around and think that if someone else changes, then I can get what I want. And I even find myself getting caught up in this thinking sometimes. So I think it's quite natural to do that. And we certainly don't need to pathologize, but we do need to support bringing clients along to be able to recognize, okay, what are you actually trying to get to for yourself? And how can you actually inform individual changes that are under your control to get to this outcome?
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, I'm thinking about some common sorts of complaints, I would say, that a client might have. Like, I want my partner to stop criticizing me. Or I want my partner to make some sort of lifestyle change because I'm worried about their health. Or I want my partner to drink less. These are things that I hear pretty regularly. And I think that all of those things are actually a wish for something outside of yourself rather than some identification of what the system is that you're in relationally and what piece of that system you can shift. So let me think if I can think of a way to talk about this in a concrete way. So let's imagine you're working with a client who wants their partner to drink less. Then that is a wish for a change outside of yourself rather than something that you would do differently. And so I'm just curious, where would you go with that? And I can speak to it as well, but let's just see if we can play with this example a little.
Yeah, I just have a question before we go there. It's interesting that you use the word wish. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you chose that particular word? Because we don't often, spend a lot of time using the word wish in therapy. So what's up with that?
I try to look for language that helps people distinguish between something that is in your control and something that's not in your control. And to me, a wish conveys, we're hoping for the best. We're fingers crossed. We've got, all right, we're hoping that the universe aligns and somehow this materializes for us. But that's very different from, I want a different dynamic between me and my partner. And so I'm going to take this concrete step that's under my control and that feels right to me in order to feel better within myself right away. And secondarily, see if it shifts anything in the system of the relationship.
Okay, I'm understanding exactly now why you're using the word wish. And I imagine that really helps people kind of get that aha, because when you think about wishing upon a star or some of the things that we've heard about in the local colloquial conversations, then that is kind of like I'm throwing dust up in the air and it's not under my power or control at all what happens next. So this is a pretty big juxtaposition from a therapy goal, the way that I'm hearing it.
I love the example of wishing upon a star, and it totally gave me a memory of wishing upon a star when I was little. I didn't know what to wish for. I always wished for a white rabbit. I wanted a white rabbit. And I did eventually get a white rabbit. I was probably 45. So it's really an illustration of, if I really want the experience of a relationship with a rabbit, I can wish for it or I can make it happen.
Right.
Right. And as a kid, of course, right, there are some things we can make happen and some things we can't make happen. And that's always true. Wishing for, like, how is that rabbit going to materialize in your life? You would have to at least take an empowered step of asking for a rabbit. I didn't do that. I just wished for a white rabbit.
This is completely decadent. I totally am getting my giggle fest on. I love this. And can we just stick with this for a little bit because it's so yummy and, dare I say, quite adorable. And so in this white rabbit wish, you're saying there are things that you never thought to do, like ask someone who had the capability to go and pay for or help you find a white rabbit. But that first step would have started with you knowing something about yourself, right? Being able to recognize this is the experience I want. This is something I want. And then maybe the second step, maybe the third, there might be something else in there that looks like identifying who to ask and then actually making that request. But what if you're scared? Could that be a goal? Is that ever a goal that you might use with a client who, what did you say, has a partner who they want to drink less?
I think surfacing emotions around it is really helpful. I think to me, the first biggest block is sort of a failure of imagination. We mostly don't learn that we're in a relational system with the people that we relate with. And what we do does actually influence what other people do and how other people feel and the choices that they make. And so there's a certain empowered aspect to identifying, I can't control whether my partner drinks or not, but there are some things I can control. I can talk about what's important to me. I can certainly make a clear request. I would love to go out to dinner with you, and I'm happy to have a glass of wine. And I wonder if you would be willing to run the experiment of not drinking other than a single glass of wine with me at this particular dinner. It's a very clear, very concrete request. And I don't know whether the partner is going to say yes or no. I want to do that or I don't want to do that or make a counteroffer. We can't control that. But if we don't make a concrete request, we also don't get the feedback of what are they willing to do and try because it's important to me, and what aren't they willing to do and try because it's important to me. And a single instance is not enough to really evaluate this. But over the course of, let's say, 6 months or a year of therapy, the client will begin to notice there's a trend here. If there's something that's important to me and I make a clear request that's essentially a checkbox that's actionable and concrete and warmly offered, my partner generally tries it. Or my partner generally doesn't try it. And then that's just information in that we really need. But the missing piece often is the clear request at the beginning, I think.
Oh, this is so good. So let me respond to this. Very exciting. I'm going to add some of my little pieces in there too. So I start with what would you want and how do you typically go about getting it, right? And sometimes that takes a little bit of attunement for the client, kind of thinking back and trying to get realistic, trying to get really super honest about, well, what am I actually doing? I think I'm doing this. What am I actually doing? And sometimes there's a bit of a chasm between what people are doing and what they believe they're doing. And when there's two people in my office, that other person is usually very quick to be like, no, you didn't ask that way. You said it this way or the other way. But either way, trying to get people to recognize what am I currently doing and how is that working or how is that not working? And so another step and it's not always in this order, when you're in the therapy space, sometimes if you're kind of an organic, kind of be present type human, it might look one way on day 1, and on day 8, when they come back, it might look totally different. But helping a client identify what are the blocks to doing it this other way? What are the blocks to asking that question? Well, I'm going to be afraid. They might get angry and I won't know how to handle it. So I think it's really important to surface those feelings and emotions around that so that I can begin to invite them to see. So you might be frightened. And if you are, can you think of a time where you've been a little nervous or anxious about something and you've been able to do it anyway? And maybe we can channel some of that energy. So I'd like to take them to basically a concrete experience where they feel like they've had some level of success to support this idea of having this request. Because the way that I think about it is if you haven't done it yet and it's something you've really been wanting, there must be some block there. So when we identify a goal, not a wish, using your language, when we identify a goal, how can we even sometimes notice that, wow, before we get to this goal, we might even have a couple of other ones that we need to hit at a time. So that's a mouthful. Anything showing up inside of you as you hear me share?
I love it. I just love hearing how you go about putting this stuff into practice, because everybody kind of has to come to terms with it themselves and figure out how to get the right balance of warmth and challenge, and how to get the entry point that, where we start to ease in and begin to initiate an intervention of some sort of change process or what have you. When you have a client who's new in their work with you and new to this idea, probably what they're going to come with, I think, is complaints. And they really want to share, right? Like lots of complaints, sometimes a whole list, sometimes they've written it all down. And so then for you to say, what do you want and what are you doing now helps them do what they want to do, which is talk about the past. When what I want them to do is talk about the future. Where are we headed? Where are we going? And what are the blocks to getting there? But people really want to feel heard and understood. And your approach of giving them kind of a structured opening to talk about something past. What have you really been doing? What have you tried? How is it working? What's your experience of that? There's room in there to pile on some complaints. And there's a funny way in which I think that's comforting to people rather than just being like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this.
I just want to name and confess, though, for me, there's a tension there. And I can sometimes feel it internally when I am in the therapy space with clients, that what is that balance? And I love that you're kind of pointing that out and pinpointing right there of, we don't want to live in the past, but if we don't spend some time there, for me as a clinician, I don't feel like I'm really joining the client right where they need to be. But then I have a voice in the back of my head that's like, okay, and I know that you're here so that something can be different in your life. So I don't know, maybe I'm the only person out there who somehow doubt it, but that dance can be a little tricky for me, and settling into, how about let's just be present? Let's just be present for a little bit. And I can name what I'm noticing at some point. Okay, I notice that when we start talking about the dynamic that you've been experiencing and how frequently that happens, I can see a real charge there. Can you notice that too? So client may stop and notice and then go right back in, or they may stop and notice and attune to what's happening internally for them. Yeah, I see that kind of thing. And that's my invitation to say, like, okay, so what would happen now if you look at what you want to happen? Because I bet you've got a lot of practice thinking about what you don't want.
Wow, that's so beautifully put. I can feel what it would be like to be that client. It just feels warm, welcoming, validating, comforting, very, very joining. It's beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you. That's so important to me. And I know it's important to you as well. And so I guess kind of what we're talking about is not only helping clients set goals, but how to join in a way that we're modeling to some extent. Does that make sense?
It does. Tell me more about what we're modeling there.
So I'm listening, and I'm really listening. And often there is suffering that's happening. And so having the ability to be present with someone in their suffering, that matters to me for the type of clinician that I am. And so we're modeling that listening. We're modeling that presence. We're modeling that validation, not agreement. Not, oh yeah, your partner's the worst human in the world and they're doing everything wrong. Nope, not agreeing, but we're validating. This is a human experience that you're having. And copy and paste the nature of the human experience. Maybe it's different for me. Maybe it's different for their partner. But ultimately, this is a human experience that we're having. And we can align on the fact that we all have those human moments. So that's what I can validate. And I think people can validate their partner's human experience, or their child's, or their parents, or their siblings' human experience. And then make that request. Can we pivot to look at how we can bring something to the surface that's actually going to bring about change? And then that's that clear goal, I think, that kind of picks right up where you're talking about, is that request. So when I say, can we pivot? That's the same thing as saying, I really value your company. When we laugh together, when I get to enjoy that tenderness, that flirtation, or whatever it is, it means so much to me. So when we go out to dinner tonight, would you be willing to consider running the experiment? Because I loved that language, by the way, when you said run that experiment. Would you be willing to run the experiment of limiting your intake to one glass of wine? And what I like to also support clients in practicing is that yes, no, and maybes are all fantastic answers. Can I say a little bit more about that before I bring you in?
Please.
So if we look at the idea that we're doing life together to get to know one another, not to have you meet every single one of my needs, not to have you full-time be mommy or daddy, but really to be together and to know one another in our as is state, the no tells me something about you. Maybe tells me something about you. Yes tells me something about you. So regardless of the nature of your response, which category that falls in, I'm gaining something, and it's something really valuable for the duration of the relationship.
Well, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. So circling all the way back to the idea that what we're doing as therapists or coaches or clinicians is important in the job we do, but it's also important in the modeling of a way to be relational with somebody, that then when your client has an experience of you listening, grounding, slowing down, being curious, surfacing, I'm going to use the buzzword consent here because what we're talking about with yes, no, maybe and a pivot is consent, then you're framing this as doable, accessible, something that you can find language for, and you're essentially modeling for your client how to have a hard conversation in a way that you can not just do a good job in the hard conversation, but also sense within yourself why it's important to you to be in a hard conversation in the first place. We can't always get our way all the time. And so you're explicitly surfacing that it's a good thing. It's a explicitly positive thing when your partner is honest with you, even if it feels hard to hear or like bad news. Did I understand what you're going for here?
You understood exactly what I'm going for, and you have such a way with words. I just love your concision and the reach of your language, because I think I can be a little wordy. And then here you come behind for the people who can't handle all those words, and you just make it so accessible. But you're exactly right. Building up a window of tolerance where we can handle the yeses, the nos, the maybes is so important. And you said something else that I really liked, that we're not going to be able to get our way all of the time. And some of us are still learning that. And I'm raising my hand as one of those people too, because, we're really taught in this culture that you can have everything. And I'll go one further. Sometimes we're taught that we should have everything, and that's just not realistic. And it doesn't aid in our human development.
Not just that we should have everything, but our partner should deliver it to us. You should be my mommy, my daddy, my best friend, my supporter, my super hot sex partner, my everything all the time, even if I'm not at my best. And it's a really unmeetable sort of ideal, I think.
Wish. To go back to your word. It's a wish. It's a total wish. And, I get it. We have these unmet needs, and it is much easier to look outside of ourselves and want somebody to take care of those needs. But I am so greedy as a clinician and a therapist and a coach that there's just no way I would want to sit by and watch someone be cheated out of the opportunity to become more than what they knew they could be. And so to watch someone defer and defer and defer and defer the needs meeting, the developmental needs meeting of their internal self to someone outside of themselves, it's a losing game. And I just don't want to buy in to someone's losing game. So not only is there that beautiful empowerment piece of being able to identify a self-directed goal that is dependent upon your own inertia, your own internal toolkit that can be built and increased. Maybe you start with just a hammer, but by the time it's all said and done, you've got a hammer, you've got pliers, you've got screwdrivers, and even some electric gadgets, but that you're doing your own work and you're living with the benefits that extend beyond maybe your romantic connection into work, into friendships, into how you engage with strangers. Tell me how that's landing with you.
It's really lovely to kind of hear how you're putting this together. And I think that the people listening are going to start to feel like this is something that they could work with. What surfaced for me in that last piece is the curiosity around how does the past fit with the present? Because in an adult relationship, two adults or more adults, adult partners, it's not reasonable to expect our adult partner to meet all of our needs. And it's not at all reasonable. And yet, I think most of us, I'm tempted to say all, but maybe there's somebody who's like spectacularly emotionally healthy out there that I've never met. A lot of us, me included, would really like if our intimate partner or partners would repair the damage of our childhoods for us. And, that is such a human wish. When you get very close with somebody, it's really tough, I think, to distinguish between the part of you that's little and the part of you that's adult. And to figure out this little part wants to be taken care of in particular ways and may have been harmed a lot or a little, or there might just be some problematic behavior patterns that formed how somebody thinks about themselves, their self-worth, whether what they say is going to be heard and held as important or whether they should retreat to the back and be quiet. All of these things kind of come from early learnings, which don't have to be trauma with a big T, but they could be. And then it all kind of comes forward with us. And for me personally, it was spectacularly bad news when my therapist told me it's not reasonable to expect that of an adult partner. I mean, I really was like, what the fuck?
Oh, preach to the choir, please, Martha. Oh my gosh. Say that again. It was such bad news. I literally think, okay, I've just hijacked your moment. And the momentum is so strong. I can't stop. I can remember like stopping in the therapy session like a child when my therapist began to invite me into this awareness. And mind you, I was a therapist. So there's that. I don't know if I should even be admitting that, but yeah, it was so painful. And the grief, can I just be honest and go off at a really human moment? The grief around realizing that no one else was going to do it. I tell you, that took me a significant amount of time. Even as I did begin to build that bridge to myself, there was grief along the way, and truly recognizing that the time of being a child and being treated like a child was behind me. There was a little bit of good news, though, even in the early days. And that good news for me was I knew myself better than anyone else could. And so the feedback loop around meeting those needs, it was going to be pretty short. And that I was actually the best person, the most well-suited for that work. So as that awareness increased, the grief began to decrease. And I had to let some people off the hook. I had to let my parents off because it wasn't serving me. Okay, I feel so exposed. I feel so vulnerable. I hope our friends listening forgive the indulgence.
I've got to imagine that our friends listening are thinking, oh, therapists are human beings. What a good thing to know. And
Mhm.
maybe your vulnerability and mine can help people realize, we're in this helping profession that has a huge amount of responsibility attached to it. And while we're helping dozens of people with their growth process, sometimes through very, very difficult stuff, we also are simultaneously handling our own growth process. There's just a tenderness about that. And our clients don't know about our growth process because the work is about them. The focus is on them. We're holding a mirror up for them. And yet there is this whole self. I think some of the work that some of my clients have done has been some of my best teacher in terms of
Mhm.
through some things and how to think about some and how to really muscle through some of these ideas. Let's talk about that grief thing for just one more second, if you're willing, because I don't want you to be hanging out there all by yourself, vulnerable. I also had an enormous grief process around the idea that nobody was going to come and save me. And also quite a lot of anger that my parents hadn't done a better job of resourcing me for adulthood. I think anger was right underneath that grief for me and came forward in any situation where if shame came up for me, I would express it as anger. Just lots of kind of confusion within myself about what can I expect? What is it okay for me to ask for? What's okay, which is, I'm putting air quotes because it's so, people have so many ideas about, if I suggest a goal or an aspiration or an experiment that's within your particular sphere of influence to put into practice, that can feel like, so you're saying, I just have to do all the work all the time still,
I've
so
heard that.
right. I mean, there's so much confusion around this, which is how it would be that I think we're talking about grief, we're talking about trauma, we're talking about the past intersecting with the present, we're talking about leftover patterns from childhood in the very same conversation where we're talking about goals, because that's what comes up as soon as you start trying to pivot from complaining to taking the reins in a forward looking and acting way. That's just a big, big process. And it boils down to like from one sentence to the next when I write about it. But when we're actually doing this in the therapy room, it's not linear like that. And for a lot of people, it's not like we go from this thing to that thing. No, we go around the block for 3 months working through the emotions that are coming up around how sad or infuriating it is that life is what it is and relationships are
Mhm.
what they are. And my relationship is what it is. It's just so multi-leveled and layered.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. And where my brain goes with that is, there are people who, like you said, think it's a linear process. And I often say this is a zigzaggy circular process. So, this idea that we're going to just hop along stepping stone to stepping stone is not always accurate. And then sometimes there are people who are ready for that type of process. And then we go there and we can do that. I thought maybe we could have a little bit of fun circling back to what's that example you gave about I want my partner to drink less. So coming in and like, I'm really upset. This is the dynamic. My partner drinks more than I think they should. And I just need to figure out how to get them to drink less so that I can be happier and more relaxed, because I find that I'm really on edge every time we go out and I can't have a good time. So these are concerns, complaints, and where would you go next with that?
Well, there was such a beautiful therapeutic opening in there because you said, I just need to figure out how to. So at least that's you. It's not like you didn't say, I just want my partner to stop drinking. You said, I need to figure out how to get that. And so I would start there. I would say, wow, that's insightful. There's at least a piece of you that realizes that there might be something that you could do that might have some influence on this. That's beautiful and spectacular. And so, first of all, I just wonder if you would say a little bit more about that. Did I hear that right? And what's on your mind there in terms of what you might do differently that might create a different vibe between you and your partner, or some action you could take that you haven't tried yet, or maybe you have. So that would be where I would start. How about you? Do you see a different opening or?
Yeah, so I don't know that I would start exactly there, but I'm giggling inside because even though we're kind of doing this little impromptu role play, when you gave me that compliment, when that little bit of praise, when you noticed that one thing that even in this impromptu role play, I didn't even recognize I had said, there was something in me that made my spine stack a little bit straighter on top of itself. And so that's really interesting how you grabbed that little nugget out and ran with it. And even more interesting how I internally responded, even though this is not a real situation. So I really can see that as a positive therapeutic intervention. So for me, I think I've talked about the feelings a little bit. So I would maybe say, okay, can you name, and I have a feeling wheel that I often have people take out if they're in office. If not, I'll just say, can you name 3 of those feelings that show up for you? I can't relax or whatever. So I start from the feeling perspective, and then they might name, I'm just anxious, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm whatever it might be, disappointed. And so I'll say, okay, so I'm hearing you say X, Y, and Z. Did I get that right? So there's some aligning to kind of let them know that I heard them. And then I might say, okay, and what do you think you might want to do, or what experience do you have in dealing with some of those emotions on your own? And I'd say, oh, sometimes I'll meditate. Sometimes I'll X, Y, and Z. And so that's when I'll kind of take your track a little bit and say, well, you know what? I think I'm hearing you say, you've got some tools to deal with this that are already in your toolkit. So can we take a moment and just honor and notice that? And what's it feel like in your body to come present with the awareness that maybe you're not completely helpless in this situation after all? So that might be the opening for me. But I'll confess, you guys will hear me say this more than once. I'm not the same person every day. And it depends on who I'm interacting with. The offering that they bring will evoke different offerings that I bring. And in the Buddhist tradition, there's something that I'm trying to learn about called transmission. So there's this idea that we transmit to an open space. And there's equality in that transmission. And so that's kind of what I mean a little bit when I say I'm not the same person every therapy session, that you might get something a little bit different depending on who you are and what you're transmitting to me. But that does feel a little bit like a common offering that I might share.
I am really excited that we did this little how would you do it, how would I do it thing, because I think there are 2 things that kind of surface that are really meaningful about that as somebody who trains therapists. The first one is there are multiple roads through this. So you don't have to do it how Martha does it. You don't have to do it how Skye does it. The way to do it is how you do it, because you need to be in integrity with yourself and in connection with the client who's actually in front of you at the time, so that you're authentically present. I just sort of had this fantasy where, like, imagine this pretend session that we're totally dreaming up here. Imagine a video of the whole session with Martha and a video of the whole session with Skye. We have similar theoretical approaches. We're trying to accomplish this goals thing in the course of this session. And so I would imagine that both of us will land something goal related by the end of the session. And so intriguing to me that I can see now that winding pathway might be a little different. It might be very different. And also the goal that ends up arising might be quite different by the end of the session. And none of that matters. What matters is that we're in integrity with ourselves and in connection with an actual human who's showing up how they're showing. So that's the first thing that super stood out for me. And then as I was sort of mulling
Uh-huh.
that back burner, I also was noticing both of us gave some positive feedback, some praise, some strokes. And I think that's a piece that a lot of people miss, to notice what a client's already doing well, because it's so terrifying. If you've ever been in therapy, we both obviously have, but for any listener, have you been in therapy? Do you remember how incredibly scary and vulnerable it is to just kind of lay your problems out for a complete stranger to take a look at and then like put their hands in? It's very, very unnerving. It's terrifying. And a lot of clients that come to me are very clear and explicit that they're worried that I'm going to push them, or that I am pushing, because I am very challenging, and they don't want to be pushed, or they want to verify that they have free choice, or they want whatever. So when you see somebody do something really important that's part of a system, if you can complement it in a specific way, first, it brings down the kind of limbic system freak out around vulnerability. But also, I think it models something important to be able to, even in a hard conversation with your spouse, to be able to say, "Oh, I really appreciate that you said that to me. That was very helpful." Or whatever. Like, positive feedback is, dare I use the word lubricant, is a really good lubricant for the therapeutic process and for managing anxiety.
Yes, 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 and yes. I did not notice that we both had some similarities there. I want to just say a little bit more about how I would use that positive feedback to help a client surface a goal. So if they say, I know how to do this, and I say, oh, okay, so I'm hearing you already have some tools in your toolkit. Is this something that you think could be useful in moving you closer to this experience that you want? And so then, whatever the response, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Some people can't see the yellow brick road. Some people are like, the bricks are glaring. Wicked just came out, Wicked 2. So depending on what they can or cannot see, we can begin to kind of whittle some of what they're already using to get closer to, this is what I want to do. This is the action I want to take, so that I have a different experience in this situation, regardless of what the other human in the relationship dynamic does or does not do. And then, great. Do you want to practice that? And so they might practice right there in my office, imagining that the other person was sitting there in the chair. And if there are 2 people, or there have been 3 people in my office, sometimes there have been 6 people in my office. 6 is a little hard to have impromptu practice with. I might invite them to practice using the same technique, but with something really simple, like, will you get me a cup of coffee? So something that's really low stakes, super low risk, but using the tools that they're identifying that they have and practicing it there on the spot, but not for that really big thing that maybe they want to make a request about.
I love the practicing in session idea. I think that there's a pitfall to talking about something a lot and never really practicing it, because then the client goes home and we're not there to help support them through their learning process. And I don't know about you, but every time I've ever done something new, it's a mess for a minute. And it would
Okay.
sure be great to have somebody there to help me kind of refine the mess before I take it to a higher stakes situation where I have some emotion involved in it.
Absolutely. I want to share this little thing that came to me one day. And I tell you what, it was so fun when my brain surfaced this idea, like right in the middle of the session, because I actually had never done it before. But now I have clients give themselves a response to their homework or whatever the thing is that they want to go and do at home that they decided in session, give themselves a response regardless of how it goes. So in this example, where I'm going to go and have this conversation with my partner about the drinking and make a request when we go to dinner, would you be willing to limit yourself to one glass of wine? So the homework for the client is I am going to make that request. And after I make the request, I will already have a script that I'm going to offer myself about what a great job I did meeting my goal. So if my partner says yes, I'm so proud of myself for taking this step and having a clear and explicit request that was me-based and not judgmental and not critical. My partner says no, I am so proud of myself. If my partner says maybe, I am so proud of myself. And I find that this really reinforces, and I've gotten some great feedback on this little thing that I've been doing lately. I've found that it really reinforces the idea that these goals are really about us and our own personal development and our relationship skills. So I'm glad that kind of popped in my mind so that I could share that with you and everyone who's listening. I love that technique.
I love it too. Can I use it?
Yes, yes, yes. I want everybody who's listening. If you like it, take it. If you like it, no. In transmission, they say, if you like it, receive it, not take it. If you like it, receive it. So I'm going to correct my language there. If you like it, receive it. Isn't that the same with everything that we're talking about today? If our friends like it, we want them to receive it.
Agreed. I tell my clients about this experiment. The marker of success, the outcome marker of success is not, did it change your partner? It's, did you do what you intended to do? Did you have an intention and did you do it? The missing piece that I don't do is what you do, which is help them develop language to give themselves positive feedback for having done it. And I think that's so brilliant because it's my words around that somehow are difficult to grasp sometimes. Like the idea that the success would be that you had a plan and you did the plan. People are like, but the reason I'm doing this is because I want my partner to change. So how is that even relevant to me? Sometimes when we're in the realm of words, the idea can just kind of get lost in the mix. And so you're finding a way to really experientially highlight that. So when you do it, regardless of how it's received, what's your feedback for yourself? I'll say you get a gold star. But it'd be better if they gave themselves a gold star than if they needed to somehow remember this session with me when it came to that. Be much better. So that's brilliant. I'm totally receiving it. I got it.
Thanks. I like those yummies about positive reinforcement. Don't we all like those yummies of positive reinforcement? So Martha, I think, what do we want to offer to our listeners as we wind down this conversation today? I think there's definitely more that we can say. So I'd love it if our friends would just keep coming back and hearing about this and the many other topics. But is there anything in particular that you feel like you want to offer as we get ready to close the conversation down for now?
Well, I think this is such a huge topic. So first of all, I would love it if you have questions about this, if you would ask them, because we will probably respond to them in a future episode. This is one of those never-ending topics that every single client is different. Every single moment is different. And it's not just straightforward, easy intervention. It's something that a lot of people have a lot of resistance around. So I would invite the questions. And then I also would just highlight, like, I truly believe that this intervention is magic. When I went from not knowing that a self-motivated, clearly identified, small actionable goal was important, before that, my work was nebulous. Those early sessions were kind of mushy and blurry. And sometimes it took a couple months to really feel like we were getting traction. And this single intervention is so magical in its ability to organize that treatment in a direction that is productive so that we don't just spend 3 months complaining. And it is human nature to really want to spend as long complaining as possible. And then the distress goes up and the pattern gets worse. And, I end up leaving at the end of the day feeling like, oh my God, I definitely did not make a difference there. And also this is getting hard and boring.
Yep. Yeah, we don't love that feeling, but I think everyone who's working as a coach, a therapist, definitely has had some experience with that. Yeah, it's just gold. It's just gold.
Yeah, that's what I would leave people with. Do you have any other kind of pull it together thoughts about this?
I do not have any other pull it together thoughts about this. I think you did a beautiful job, and maybe we say bye for now.
Thank you so much for your offering. What a beautiful intervention, too. I love learning from you.
See everybody next time.
So, I want to tell you that I've got a free series about therapeutic goal setting that you can sign up for right now. It doesn't cost anything, and it's based on my observations from consulting groups for lots of therapists. Getting crisp on goals can make all the difference. So you'll see me in some video role plays landing the goal setting intervention and also unpacking what I'm thinking about in those situations so that you can hopefully take that information and put it into practice yourself. All the details are in the show notes.
Okay, friends, you've just listened to Martha and I talk not just about goal setting, but some of our own personal stories and what we bring personally and professionally to our work. If any of what I showed up with today resonates with you, you can find me at workwithdrskye.com. My coaching practice offers practical and relational support. I'd love to hear from you. Again, that's workwithdrskye.com.